We usually think of grace as something that sort of not reliable, sort of maybe here, maybe not. If we do all the right things, then maybe, but it's unpredictable, right? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. The counterpoint of grace is God's will, right? When we like what's happening, we call it grace. When it's sort of tough love, it's God's will, Thy will be done. As if there's two different things happening, right? But I'd suggest it's not like grace is, sometimes sort of bestowed and sometimes not, and, it's sort of dependent on, whether you've been naughty or nice lately, or, it's not. The difficulty actually is with grace, right? So the better question is not how can I become more available to grace. The real question is, what am I doing right now to make myself unavailable for grace? How am I keeping life at arm's length? How am I holding myself apart? How am I maintaining my sense of separation from life? Those are questions that we can do something about. The question of like, how can I, be more grace prone? What would you have to do? But that's usually the way it's framed, like, how do I have to improve myself? How do I have to justify my existence here? How do I have to, fix myself? Isn't that how it's usually framed? Somehow I'm not quite worthy now, but if I do what I think I should be doing, then maybe I will qualify. And even then, it's not really certain. Sort of a long shot at best. But what if the reality of it is that we are already what we seek, and we just haven't discovered it yet? That changes the game a lot, doesn't it? If we're already what we seek, then we're not talking about fixing, improving, attaining. Not talking about resolving our karma. I'm not talking about waiting for some future qualifying event. What we're really talking about is, how am I missing what is already the case? What am I doing? What thoughts am I believing that is causing me not to see what's already present? That's a much, much different issue. Right? It takes away the whole future game that most of us play. Like I'm working towards it, I'm progressing, I'm improving, I'll get there someday. Right? Anybody ever play that one? I know it's happening, not as fast as I want it to, but I'm on the path, right? I'm on the path. So being on the path implies that I'm going somewhere that is other than where I'm at now, right? You see the fallacy of that? It's denying what is already present in hopes of finding something better, right? You know, an improved version of me. You know, so the real question is to look at what concepts, beliefs that we're holding on to that pull us away from the reality of what is actually happening now. You know, our current existence. So what we're talking about isn't at any distance. It's not being withheld from us in any way. The only thing that makes it difficult to see is that it is so ever present and so in our face that we miss it. So obvious, it's hidden in the obvious, right? It's hidden where we would never think to look, in what is already present, already fully present, not sort of embryonically present, like fully present, fully the case, right? When that's recognition of what we truly are is seen, it's not, it's seen in full clarity or not at all. It doesn't mean that we understand it or the implications of it. That can take some time. You know, understanding the full implications of what we actually are. That can take a long time, and there's no apparent end to that. So there's recognizing what we are, and then there's a slower process of this body-mind coming into an alignment of what we've actually recognized. That can take some time. That's a lifelong journey. But the recognition can be at any moment, because it is already what we are. So it's not like this grace is whimsical or judging us in any way, right? This whole sense of life judging us, the only thing that judges us, right? We do it to ourselves, don't we? Anybody not judge themselves? You know, so we don't need God to do that. We're entirely capable of judging ourselves. And we're not, usually not that friendly about it, are we? You know, it's not like a kind, loving judgment. It's like a harsh, right? We know how we should be, how we could be better. According to whom? Who's making the rules? You know, maybe it's society, maybe it's religion, maybe it's culture, but who's buying into that set of rules and then applying it to ourselves? You know, and then it feels like, you know, we're not quite measuring up. We've got a ways to go. You know, we've got a project, you know, we're working on it. We're getting there. And then we can get discouraged. And then we can blame ourselves, and we can feel bad about ourselves. And we realize there's more work to do. I mean, just talking about it, you get sleepy, right? But all of those things are just thoughts, right? It's just mental activity. Mental activity is something that you may have noticed. Well, meditation's a good time to notice it. Mental activity isn't something that you control, right? Anybody doubt that? I mean, it goes on when you don't want it to go on. It thinks about things that you don't necessarily want to think about. I mean, if we could control it, we could just ask, just say, hey, time out. I'm going to sit and meditate for 30 minutes, come back online 30 minutes from now. If we had control, we could do that. But what we can notice is thoughts occur. That we can notice. That we can't control. What we do have control over is whether or not to believe those thoughts. Right? A thought just not believed is just background noise. Right? It's elevator music. It's not, it's not a problem. Where it gets to be a problem is when we believe the thought. If there's just a random thought running through your mind, I'm an unworthy person. I'm an unlovable person. Just a thought, right? But believe that thought. That's where the power is. So, if we deprive the thought of our belief, thoughts may linger for a while, maybe years, maybe forever, who knows? They've been conditioned to reoccur for a long time. So they may hang around for a while. But if there's no hook there, there's no problem. It's just background noise. But if we're looking to thought for our reality, for our interpretation of what's happening, then those thoughts have power. We give them power. Right? And then it changes how we feel. It actually changes our body chemistry, our chemistry of feeling. Right? It's an easy experiment. You can just sit in a quiet room, feeling perfectly good, and sort of recall, some really difficult time in your life, and sort of play the video, like in real time and in full color. And you can feel the changes in your body, right? That's the power of thought. Thought believed has that power. So any thought that we are harboring that convinces us that there is something that we have to do to earn what we already are, to be worthy of it, and we believe that thought, then we'll be seeking for a long time. Right? Seeking actually forever, until we get just it's so frustrated that we might just actually drop that belief. That's the hard way to go, right? It's not the only way to go, but it's the hard way. The other way is just to really see the limitation of conceptual thought. Right? So there's the direct perception, like we were looking at this morning, the direct perception of whatever's happening. And then there's our mind telling us what's happening, almost like a sports broadcaster, They tell you what just happened. You saw it yourself, but then they tell you about what you just saw. Right? So the mind does that, and we tend to believe the mind more than our actual direct experience. We trust our concepts more than reality. Right? We have the direct experience of being aware to our perceptions, just like we looked at this morning. That's our direct experience if we look without concepts. And then the mind comes in and says something like, "That can't be right. That can't be that easy. Can't already be present. Can't already be what I am." So we trust our concepts more than the reality. But this investigation is really about looking directly at our experience rather than, trying to fit the experience into our concepts, into our concepts about, what we've read about spirituality or other people's spiritual experiences, or, what people told us life was about, or how to be happy, or and then we try to, adjust our life to conform to the concepts rather than looking at life directly in our own direct experience to see what the reality of it is. It's just like, looking at thoughts. We can look at it, time after time and see that I don't actually have control over these things. They seem to arise, and they hang around for a while, and then they subside in favor of another thought, and on and on. Do we know where they come from? No. I mean, we've been taught where they come from, but in our own direct experience, do we know where they came from? Or is it more true to say that, no, all I can say is that at some point they appear, and at some point they drop away in favor of some other thought. That's my experience. What we do is we notice that, and then we intuit that there must be a thinker of those thoughts. Right? There's somebody in there that is the one thinking the thoughts, choosing to think what thoughts. Right. So we have this mental picture of almost like a backstage manager, and the thoughts are all, grouped up there ready to go on stage, and the backstage manager, okay, you're next, go, you're up. But that's what we sort of imagine this thinker self to be, the one that's actually choosing what we think. But the reality is there's one thought arising from somewhere, and then another thought arising, and then disappearing back into silence, and another thought arising. That's our direct experience. That's it, in terms of thinking. But all the while there is this awareness that is present for that's present for the thoughts, that it's present for our self-judgments, it's present for our hopes, it's present for our ambition for, release from a sense of struggling. It's present for all of that already, totally. In fact, all of those things are only happening. There's only a recognition that those things are happening because of awareness. All of that is happening already within a field of our awareness. That is how we live our life already. But the concept is, no, it's me, separate individual me. All my thoughts, all my history, that's what's living this life. So that concept, that belief in a conceptual structure, me as a separate self, is what creates the sense of separation. We're not separate. It couldn't possibly be separate. I mean, even on a, ecological basis, we couldn't possibly be separate. We're certainly not separate from this air, right? Hold your breath for a couple of minutes and that becomes pretty obvious. We're not separate from water, we're not separate from sunlight, we're not separate from warmth, we're not separate from plants, from food. And yet we think, yeah, that may be true, but still I'm separate, I'm a separate individual person out in this big world trying to get by. And we wonder why this sense of grace, this sense of at-homeness, the sense of, being welcomed by existence, why that feels distant. As if somehow life, the immensity of life, the grandeur of life is somehow distant. It's not that life is distant at all. I mean, it is, that's the only thing that's happening, right? So the only thing that has created this sense of separation is beliefs about who we are. Beliefs that remove us, separate us from that grace. So any thought that denies the reality of that in this moment separates us. So any thought that we have of being not good enough, not worthy enough, not pure enough, not guilt-free enough, not having the right beliefs, not having had the right experiences, any self-judgment about something lacking in this moment removes us from this moment, doesn't it? I mean, that's the effect of it. So it's not like we have to go chasing grace, like it's up to me to find it, right? Like it's hiding somewhere. It is the only thing that is happening. I mean, that's why we miss it. It's so ever-present, so familiar, so common, mysterious, but common that we miss it. It's like, fish looking, where's the water? I've heard about this thing. I know it's around here somewhere. I just got to find it. And so we run around looking for it as if it's somehow elusive. But the only thing that removes us from that direct sense of it is our beliefs. That's it. It's holding on to things that we think are true that actually aren't. That's the entirety of it. We think we know how things should work. We think that we need to do something to earn a state that we've heard about, that people call enlightenment, awakening, self-realization, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it. And we think that somehow it is absent now, but if I do the right things, I will maybe attain it, right? Or somebody else will give it to me. Somebody else with lots of charisma and power can give it to me. There are people that have the power to elevate our energy. That's true. But if we don't actually understand the ground of it, it doesn't last. Feels good, but it doesn't last. What does last is the recognition of what we truly already actually fully are. It's not a high state. Right? It opens us up to high states. It opens us up to every state. It's not a state in itself. It's just that within which all states happen, all experiences happen. It's not a particular experience. Right? It's just, the awareness that we pointed to this morning, it is the capacity to notice sound, bird sounds. It's not the hearing itself, it's the capacity to hear. It's not the bird itself. Whatever objects may appear within awareness, it's that capacity to be aware of whatever's happening. So it receives everything, refuses nothing, holds nothing, grasps onto nothing, and yet experiences everything. It's what's already happening. It's how we all already live our life. We just give credit to this separate me person, with ideas and issues and shortcomings. I think that's what I've got to fix. Right? Meantime, awareness is aware of that also, So from the perspective of awareness, what needs to be fixed exactly? What somehow is outside of the realm of life? Some alternative reality? It's only a thought believing that, and even that is happening within this same manifestation, is it not? Where else can it happen? It's astonishing enough that there's this one existence. All of this arising out of what? Even the physicists nowadays say it's all about observation. Observation creates the reality. All of this arising out of apparent nothingness. That's spectacular, right? But somehow we believe, yeah, that may all be true, but somehow I am separate from that. Right? I have my own reality. I've somehow created my own separate reality apart from creation. If that's not arrogance, what is. But that's what we've convinced ourselves of, that somehow, through some flaw, through some inherent shortcoming, that we didn't even know how we got into the hole, but here we're trying to dig ourselves out of it. And somehow we believed that storyline. But somehow we feel like it would be arrogant of us to believe that somehow we were inseparable from life itself. We feel that's arrogant. But I mean, when we really consider it, it just seems, I mean, that's an acknowledgement of our unbelievable good fortune to find ourselves alive and able to experience this creation. But somehow we find it justifiable to deny, or sort of subjugate that to the sense of, yeah, but, I've got problems too. But, I'm not saying that there aren't difficult times. All of us have experienced that, some obviously more than others. We're not denying any experience. We're not saying it's all just, easy. It's not. But I do feel like this life, with all its challenges, with all its hopes, with all its frustrations, with all its pain, with all its pleasure, all of that entire realm of possibilities is absolutely conducive for waking up. If it's all just nice and easy, nobody'd ever wake up. There'd be no motivation, right? Why bother? Why look? Feels comfortable, I'll go with that. I would guess that most of us have come to spirituality through some type of challenge, personal challenge. Doesn't have to be that way, but it seems most of the time it is. Most of the time it requires something to cause us to question the perspective that we've been looking at life with up to that point. Need for a different point of view. What I had thought was true up to that point, I find out isn't actually really true. I need to look in a little different perspective. And that's the motivation. Ram Dass called it fierce grace. Not easy, still grace. This whole sense of the possibility of grace is really an invitation to come more and more into alignment with how life actually is. And it seems like, life is the best teacher. It's always nudging us a little bit, It's always telling us when we're a little bit off, or when we've come more into an alignment. We can feel it. We can feel the difference. I'm not talking about mentally judging ourselves, but we can tell when we've met a friend fully and wholeheartedly, and we can tell when we've had some interaction that causes some separation, some distance, some where we've sort of broken a bond somehow. We can feel that in the body. The body's really good at feeling the difference. So it's always informing us what beliefs that we might be holding on to, that it's causing this sense of separation, this sense of me as a separate person apart from all of that. So almost like you had a pie chart, and then this is everything. This is me, this little sliver right here. Two things. That's what I mean by sense of separation. I see everybody seeking to find their way home in however they're doing it. It might be a totally dysfunctional search. I'm going to seek my way home by, finding out how to control other people more and more, gain more power. It might be totally dysfunctional, but it's still fueled by that same desire to feel sort of at ease, feel a sense of comfort in the world, a sense of safety, a sense of fulfillment. Done through drugs, done through wealth, done through love, done through all these different ways, some much more functional, obviously, than others, but it's still the same underlying sense of just this desire to feel at home in the world, at home in myself, in this body. And we think somehow that deep sense of fulfillment is somehow elusive and far away, and we miss it because it is so ever present. We don't see it because it's the only because we're already living from it, right? So we miss it. We miss the amazing sense of this awareness of being present for whatever's happening. So by being present, it's like it's inversely proportional to being self-conscious, right? So let's say you're out with some friends that you feel really comfortable with, and you're just enjoying yourself and talking. You're not being self-conscious, right? You're just being present. You might be talking. It just isn't about silence or being spiritual. It's just, having a good time with friends, totally relaxed. You're not. Contrast that with, I don't know. You're at a business function with people that you don't really know, not necessarily even trust, and you're there, and you're trying to do your thing, and there's all these self-conscious things happening. How will they feel about me? Will I, be appreciated? Will they respect me? Will they like me? All this self-conscious. The more self-consciousness there is, the less presence, right? Less self-consciousness, more presence. And we're always thinking about ourselves. How am I doing? Am I doing it right? Very aware of this me as a separate self. Presence is absent. We're just present, walking along, listening to the birds, not thinking about our problems or our history or whatever. Everything's good. We're present. You feel a difference? So the sense of self-consciousness, it's sort of like animals don't do it, right? You don't look at the deer out in the field and, you're looking at them and you can see that they're just like thinking, I'm not worthy. You can just tell. They don't, right? They're conscious, they're really conscious, fully aware, everything, but they don't have this sort of standing outside of ourselves and looking back at ourselves. Like, how am I doing now? Is this spiritual or worldly? Right? Am I operating from awareness now, or am I operating from ego? Am I getting it right? Am I getting closer? You see all this sort of self-reflection. But all of that pulls us away from actually being present. Right? The only thing that worries about, am I operating from ego now, or am I operating more from awareness? The only thing that would even ask that question, right, is ego. Awareness doesn't care. Awareness really doesn't care. Sometimes awareness is open, expansive, not focused on the objects within the field of awareness, including thought, feeling, just open. Not trying to be open, just open without a goal, without, not doing it for a purpose. Just open, because that's the nature of it. And then sometimes it's focused, right? Sometimes it's working on something, solving a problem, balancing your checkbook, whatever it's doing. Sometimes it's more focused like that. Sometimes it's totally contracted, been hurt. It just feels, I did something I don't feel good about, right? Just a sense of contraction. Awareness is there for that too, right? But we think, no, that's not spiritual, but this is. Who's making that distinction? It's not awareness. It's mind, right? It's our belief on how I should be. If I was more spiritual, I wouldn't ever feel contracted. I wouldn't ever get upset. I wouldn't ever, whatever the ideas are. Meanwhile, awareness is present for all of that. It is true that, when awareness is really present for that, those sort of more dysfunctional behaviors become more uncomfortable, so we do them less. We see them with more clarity. Someone once asked Ramana Maharshi, or was sort of implying that, a sage, never has any egoic instincts, any egoic movements. He said, no, it's not true. He said, the difference is those egoic movements may arise, but I can see them quickly enough, I choose not to act on them. That's the difference. It's wise enough that, okay, it's that, flare up of anger might be there, but it's like, no, not going there. Not as a suppression, right? But just seeing that it's not appropriate for the situation. So none of this is about denying any particular state. It actually is a recognition that we all are capable of all states. We may not choose to act on them. Anybody not ever been rageful? Right? You may not have acted on it. Or maybe you did, I don't know. But, it's not that all of those feelings aren't possible. I mean, if what we are is infinite, it has to include all of that. Hopefully along the way, it also includes some wisdom about what's appropriate, not what's best for me, but what's most appropriate for the situation. If we're in it for what's best for me, then we're still operating as a separate self. Me opposed to everything else feels different than, what action, what talking or lack of it is appropriate for this situation, for the highest and best good of everything involved. So this sense of grace isn't absent in any way. It is this what the deep recognition of our true nature feels like. True nature being our awareness. So it's not, it's a readily, even this isn't quite true, but to say it's readily available, it's never absent. It's never absent because it's what we are. So we're not having to wait for a particular high moment. It's always present. Present for the high moments, present for the mundane, present for everything. That's the freedom of it. We're not trying to force life to look only like this, only blissful. Right? That's what's been promised. That's what enlightenment has been advertised as. High state, perpetual high state. It's not a state at all. It is what is capable of experiencing all states. That's the freedom. That's the freedom. That's only something that is without attributes is big enough to experience all of it. So any desire to control our experience, to have it look only like this, only like bliss, only high, not low, it's just not how it works. We'll always be frustrated. The freedom is really to really sense into what this awareness is boundless, limitless. It is of a fundamentally different category altogether than everything else. It's formless. It's that which notices all form, that which actually enlivens all form. And yet it itself is formless. A lot of times in spirituality they use the metaphor of a mirror, right? Mirror, anything that shows up in front of the mirror is reflected in the mirror. Mirror is not choosing, right? It receives everything, denies nothing, holds on to nothing, grasps at nothing, doesn't, reach out and sort of grab an image, right? Pulls it into itself. It's not harmed by the image. So awareness is like that. I mean, that's why it's used as a metaphor often. The awareness is intimate, available, present for the whole show. And because it's not a high state, it's not a low state either. It's just, it doesn't subject itself to those kind of definitions. It's just that which is present for all states. And as such, we don't have to sort of build ourselves up to feel it occasionally. It's just ever present, right? And when we finally get around to being willing to allow the simplicity of that to be fully recognized, then life has a way of flowing in just a beautiful way, because we're no longer positioning ourselves apart from it. We're no longer opposing it. Then the difference between grace and God's will is no difference. It's just what's happening. Right? There's only ever one thing happening, and you're it. But the way we step fully into that realization is to surrender our arguments with it. The gift has been given, and our attitude is thank you, but just that we sort of hold out that. There's some teacher, I forget who it was actually, they were asked about love and hate, and this person, I can't remember who it is, said no, it's not, hate isn't the opposite of love. Individuality is the opposite of love. The sense of separateness. Because what is that love? It's the not holding back. It's the not resisting the opportunity. It's not withholding this sense of separations. It's that receptivity, right? The allowing. But in letting ourselves go there, we lose that sense of separation. So it's attractive, right? We want that and we fear it. Those two things. We move towards it and we move away from it. And we do the same thing with awakening. We like the idea of it. We like the idea of freedom and release. And it's like, yeah, but I'll lose my sense of separation. I've got a lot invested here. I'm not sure I want to give it away unless I feel like I'm trading up. As long as I can feel like I'm going to get something better, then I'm on board, but I'm not so sure. So there's sort of this moving towards and moving away. It's a really helpful thing to know, because as we get closer, that sense of what am I losing becomes very real. Because what are we actually giving up? What are we actually surrendering? Isn't this that just that sense of resistance? No. Just sort of that holding on. We don't even quite know what we're holding on to. But it's sort of like just this sense of personal self. I can't quite pin down where it is, but I've got a lot of invested in it, and I don't know what the alternative actually looks like. And that's true, we don't. But for what it's worth, I can say that there is nothing lost, that nothing true is lost. The essence of what you are is what you are already. That doesn't change. But it's fully stepping into what we actually are. But it can feel a bit like, stepping out of the space capsule, There's a certain safety there. And then to allow ourselves really to trust life to that extent, where we can trust that more than our own concepts about it. That's the only thing at risk here, right? We're only talking about misperceptions and concepts. That's what actually ultimately gets jettisoned. Nothing more real than that. It's just a loss of a misperception. But if that's what we believe we actually are, it can feel real. Right? So sometimes that movement, it's really helpful to know that movement towards, and that sense of pulling back from, just to see that movement. In the meantime, it's all being played out within awareness, all of it. The awareness is, will she or won't she? Maybe this time, maybe next time. So we may come up to that point a number of times and find ourselves backing away from it. And then one time maybe not, for no logical reason. So that's where grace can come in. We can take ourselves all the way up to that point. And we do that by seeing through thoughts and beliefs and concepts that aren't true, looking at those really, really clearly. That's what we can do. Sort of seeing that that's not where our ultimate truth lies. That we can do. That we can get in the right arena. That last step isn't something that we do by our own volition. But it almost seems like, it doesn't have to be like this, but most of the time it seems like it is. It's like we have to demonstrate our sincerity first. Before life is willing to step in and nudge us that last step. So that's what we can do to make ourselves available for grace. It's not like grace is withholding anything, but it's how through no fault of our own, just through the normal growing up process, the beliefs of sort of consensus reality, we've all concluded that what I am is separate. And it's such a strong conviction that even to question it, it's like, I'm not so sure that's a good idea. And if you tell somebody else that's what you're working on, that's probably not a good idea. But that's the fundamental misunderstanding. What I am is a separate self. That's the fundamental misunderstanding. If you were brought up in certain religions and they talk about original sin, and that seems like a really hard one to undo. But that, if there is such a thing, it's the turning away from what we once knew as an infant. We once knew that oneness. We turned away from it in favor of a separate self. We didn't even know we were doing it. And now it can seem so solid that to question it seems scary. It's just a belief that we've taken on in this lifetime and hold to be true until we make the effort to question it. Make the effort to really look and see if it's actually true, if that's actually what we are, if it's actually what's living this life. And for a while it feels good, right? Be an individual, be strong, be out there, make my way. Highly encouraged. Right? And at some point we might feel like that has its limitations. And then maybe at that point we start looking for other possibilities. In the meantime, awareness is good with the whole thing.